Hello and welcome back to Crypto Bits. I'm your host, Brittany, and today we have Daniel Krawisz joining us. Hello and welcome to the show, Daniel. Do you think you could start us off by talking a little bit about yourself and how and when you first became involved with Bitcoin?
Okay, well, I first learned about Bitcoin from Ross Ulbricht, and I learned about it from him while he was designing the Silk Road. And while I told him that Bitcoin would not work because of something in Austrian economics called the regression theorem. And unfortunately, he didn't understand Austrian economics enough to explain to me why I was wrong. But basically, in Austrian economics, the regression theorem says that a good which becomes money must have some other value, some other reason to acquire it before it can become money. However, or before it can have a price, really, before, like if it has a price, then it can become money from there. But there has to be some other reason for it to have a price before it's used as money. So what I said is that Bitcoin wasn't good for anything other than being money, because it is a pure imaginary good that produces nothing. But the difference between Bitcoin and other forms of money is this proof of work signal. And so I didn't know anything about that back then. And the proof of work signal allows everybody to see that other people are acquiring it. So unlike something like gold, Bitcoin enables this global cooperation because of this signal that gets transmitted globally. And that means that it's rational to acquire Bitcoin as a future good, as something that will become money, because you can see that it's happening. Unlike with gold, that's a lot harder to see if that's going on with gold. So Ludwig von Mises said that that speculation is not a reason that a good can become money. Now, the speculation on it becoming money in the future is not good enough on its own. But I think that Bitcoin gets around that, because even before it is used as money, you can still see that other people are acquiring it. So you can see that it's potentially a medium of exchange before it has a price, even because of the proof of work. So anyway, well, later on, I saw that Bitcoin was being traded and it had a price, and to me, that meant that well, that meant that I was wrong about it before, and I didn't understand, what I told you just now. But I thought, well, the bigger the economy gets, the better Bitcoin is going to be. So if it's growing now, then well, then it'll grow even more easily in the future. So that's what made me want to understand Bitcoin and want to get involved in it. And well, I see Bitcoin as a shared interest, and that's what's so good about it. Right now, everything that's like a shared interest in the rest of the world is being destroyed, and Bitcoin is a very strong shared interest, and through this, we can create a better world. The thing that's good about money is it brings people together. So I would say that the value of money is the other people, essentially. And Bitcoin is something that enables people to derive more value from each other. And if we can do that, then there's a much better reason to create a better world, because with Bitcoin, the other people are better. And so that's really why I wanted to get involved in Bitcoin, and why I thought it was, a good idea. But, well, unfortunately, what I didn't know then was that the Bitcoin economy was not really growing, or I should say there was a conspiracy to destroy the Bitcoin economy that was in operation around then. And so what we had initially in Bitcoin was a lot of growth in the Silk Road, which was an unsustainable business model.
Right.
Although it made a lot of money initially, it's not something that can it's not something that will work long term. And so, what I thought is that, like with any money, we would have a black market and a white market. But what we had in Bitcoin was that almost everything was in the black market, and the white market was kind of it had the appearance of being bigger than it really was, because earlier on there were quite a few people who were selling stuff for Bitcoin, but it was all kind of small time things. And then we had this one operation, the Silk Road, that was really big, and that kind of dominated. It kind of dominated for a while. And what we saw is that the people who wanted, well,
Well, as I remember it, yeah, I wasn't quite around during that time, so it's definitely interesting hearing it from somebody that experienced it firsthand. But as I remember it, there was a lot of talk about the anonymity, anonymity. Sorry, I can't say that one, but people were spreading that narrative, especially those amongst the Silk Road, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, let me tell you the problem with anonymity. The problem is that every every possible anonymity service is a group of people that provides the service to each other. So if you have used an anonymity service, then you have also been an anonymity service provider. And what we have in these so this people are not they're not they don't understand this idea, and they're not taking it seriously, because if you are part of an anonymity service and then someone uses the service to commit a crime, then you are responsible for enabling that crime.
Involved, right?
Yeah. So I mean, if an anonymity service, if there was something good about that, the only, like, people would have to create the service in a way that criminals wouldn't be able to use it. And I'm not just talking about like selling recreational drugs or something, because we could be talking about things that are a lot worse than that. We would want an anonymity service that prevents criminals from getting involved in it. So, like, money can be exchanged for human trafficking, for example, or we could be talking about stolen money or something. If we have an anonymity service, that needs to be prevented. And if you use the service, you failed to prevent it, and you're also a service provider. So this is something, well, this is something that's very sinister about anonymity, and it's something that has fooled me in the past, just because in the past I had been more inclined to believe that people are honest actors, and so I kind of assumed that people who would want an anonymity service would want to do it correctly. But really, that's not what's going on at all. And all of the anonymity services in these crypto coins are services where people deny their responsibility, where it's not talked about, because it's a scam, because they really exist to enable crime. So what we have in Bitcoin is privacy, not anonymity. So what we have in the blockchain is a bunch of records that can be made so as to be meaningless to an outside observer who doesn't have additional information. But when some kind of additional information is collected, then the transactions have a lot of meaning. And so when there is a crime, we can the additional evidence of that crime can be collected, and it can be put in conjunction with information in the blockchain, and then it becomes a story of the crime that can be used to convict people. And well, and in order for that to be really private, we would need a criminal justice system that doesn't constantly spy on everyone. We would need, warrants and, the traditional elements of a criminal justice system. So not quite like how things are working now, but
Right.
how things are supposed to work.
Supposed to, the key word there. Yeah.
So anyway, in Bitcoin, we had these splits in the chain, and these people were split based on their ideas about what Bitcoin is for, and where the value proposition is.
Mm.
So
yeah, because like, what is value? What does price actually mean? What does it mean for the space? How does the price actually fluctuate? What variables cause the price to fluctuate, and what
right.
constitutes value?
Okay, yeah, great question. So there's value and there's valuation. So valuation is the price. It's what people think the value is. So prices are conjectures about value, and value is what you ultimately get. So if you pay a certain amount to get a coin, the value is the ultimate benefit that you receive later on from having that coin. And so the cause of prices are other people's ideas about what will happen in the future. So the capital market is a future prediction contest. It's a game where we bet based on our ideas about what will happen and how we will benefit from these coins. And well, I would say that most of the people in these markets are not really thinking about this at all, and they are imagining the future benefit of the coins as being as that the coins are going to be tradable for fiat, for larger amounts of fiat money than than they paid in. But well, that doesn't really make much sense, because if you think the whole point is to get more fiat money, then you're not really thinking about these coins as money themselves.
Right.
So, and if that's what people are thinking, like if they're not really thinking about using these coins as money, then really there's no point to them, and they're not really good for anything. And so yeah, most coins are just kind of about tricking more people in so that you can get out. So they're like collective Ponzi schemes, where you or like a multi-level marketing. I mean, typically with a Ponzi scheme, well, I was going to say you don't rope other people into it to try to get more people to invest, but I guess really you do. It's really basically that the coins are started by somebody who recruits more people, and they're kind of like a team to kind of promote the coin, and they're just kind of trying to get a bigger and bigger team, and then they want to get out when they have the biggest team that they're going to get. And well,
sort of like clicks, but for cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. So but really, like, the value of money, the reason that you would want money is because you're going to be able to buy things with it. So there's going to be stuff that's produced that's for sale in exchange for the money. So really, like, what I think people should be thinking about if they're going to get some of these coins is, are people going to produce stuff that they can buy later for the coins? And well, basically all of the coins except for the original Bitcoin, which is now has ticker symbol BSV, basically none of them have an economy behind them. Okay, none of them have people producing stuff. And they're all influenced by the idea in BTC that we need to restrict transaction volume, and that bandwidth is a very, very big problem that is very, very difficult to solve, because their idea of decentralization is that all of the nodes are tiny. That what they're really thinking about, that they're like a communist society, because they want everybody to be equal, and they want them to be equally poor, and they don't want any of the nodes to be big businesses, because that would draw power away from the open source developers, who are like the central planners of the economy. It would draw power away from them into the businesses. And well, they sure don't want that. I mean, the entire, so decentralization really just means that there is no center. And but in real life, there are differences in how successful people are. So some people are going to be much bigger than others, and well, we would want people to be able to get big easily, because growth is based on providing things for other people. That's kind of how capitalism is supposed to work. So we want it to be easy for people to get big. And somebody who's a big person in one of these coin economies maintains his position by continuing to provide what the economy needs. And once he doesn't understand it anymore, then somebody else will take his position. That's decentralization. Decentralization is not, it's not communism where everybody is poor. Well, what they have in the, when the developers control the coin, we have the opposite of decentralization. We have centralization, because they're maintaining their position and they don't want anybody else to have it, even if they could do a much better job at growing the economy. So actually, let me show you some of my
Sure.
my pictures here. So do you see? Let's see there. So do you see my my art gallery window?
I do.
Okay. So, okay, there's the history of Bitcoin. And this is the hub and spokes network. So this is the problem that we solve when we develop a solution to the Byzantine generals problem. So what we do today and what we have done for the last 10,000 years or so, ever since civilization got started, is we've had these central nodes. We've had these nodes that are designated as being in the center of the network. And this can be because they claim a right to a monopoly, or because they just design themselves that way, and then people start using them. And the problem with these kinds of things is if they get corrupted, it's very difficult for people to replace them. It's very difficult for people to find new centers that are not corrupted, and people become dependent because these central nodes provide information that they need, that's not easy to get. They provide information concerning the global state. So like one thing that Twitter does is it provides identity services. So if we're talking about a particular Twitter account handle, we presume that this is a consistent identity, because that is what that's the service that Twitter is supposed to provide. But if Twitter becomes corrupted, how do we find all our friends again? If we have to figure out who outside of the Twitter network was the identity that was our friend before, how do we find those people? And so if you have this central position, you can deceive people about the global state. You can tell them that the state of the world as a whole is different from what it really is, and it's difficult for them to realize that they're being deceived because they depend on the central node for the global state. So the central node can turn the hubs into the spokes. I mean, the hub can turn the spokes into enemies of each other by lying about each other to them. So remember, in the Matrix, the Agent Smith, or the agents, Morpheus says that they can enter any hardware that's connected to the Matrix. And that's why the people who are still connected need to be treated like enemies, even though they may not be like enemies, most of the time, but any of them can turn into Agent Smith at any time. So Agent Smith is the cult personality that is trained into people who become dependent on central nodes. He is well, I'm sure that you have seen him in your life, because you were talking to someone who may have seemed like a normal person at first, and then you say something that triggers them, and then they transition into the cult personality, and then that's like they're replaying things that other people have said to them, and that they attain this this uniformity um, um, among the other people in the network. That's the problem we get with these central nodes. So what we get with Bitcoin is an alternative network that's called the small world network. And in the small world network, people are much more interconnected with one another. So if each of these agent Smiths, connects to his neighbor and connects to, to other agent Smiths, then they're all going to start to understand more easily that the central node is deceiving them, because they will have an alternate means of looking at the global state. So the way that the small world network is attained is people connect to their neighbors, and then they connect randomly across to the other side. So everybody has both nearby and distant connections at the same time. And when people can do this, the maximum distance in the network decreases. So you may have heard of 5 degrees of separation between people. So what we want is to reduce that number. We want it to be less than 3, I think. That's when we get a network that is that provides honest information about the global state without needing a central node. But the problem with maintaining the small world network is that there is this balance that people need to achieve between local connections and distant connections. If you have too many of one or the other, then the small world shape is destroyed. And the way, what we need in order to make people want to attain this balance is the network needs to produce information that people need quickly. And if it can do that, then it's worthwhile for people to try to stay balanced, because that gives them the information more quickly. So with Bitcoin, we have the blocks, and the nodes of the network need to get the latest block quickly. And I think that there's more than just the network of Bitcoin nodes. I think that there's also the network of the users of Bitcoin. And I think these people will do the same thing, because there's information that's relevant to the price of Bitcoin that comes out. So people need that information, and they're going to achieve the small world state because of their need to get information early.
Right.
So let me show you. Okay, so here's another picture of something that's like the hub and spokes network. So this one is a rigged election where it's my character has puppets, and he's doing both sides, and Jameson Lopp is standing on my nose and doesn't notice. So he's fooled by the illusion that I'm creating in this picture. That's what we have in the hub and spokes network. So like what we have in the world right now is something like this. We have different political parties and we have different nations, but there is a hidden center that is standing behind them, that is attempting to create the appearance of different things and of choices when really there aren't any. So the hub and spokes network is a system of deception and illusion, whereas the small world network is one of truth. So another thing that we need in the small world network is a way of finding new friends quickly. And so what we have in Bitcoin for that is proof of work, which means that we are proving that free energy was converted into heat with our messages. And so what I say is that this is like the antlers. So when we attach proof of work to messages, that's like memes with antlers. And what we have with the manipulators who want to create the hub and spokes network is we have people who do not understand reality very well, and we have people who depend on parasitism. So they're people who are not as good at proving at they're not as good at gaining energy before they create messages. What a manipulator needs is to send out lots of cheap messages so that they can gain energy from people that they fool, people that they deceive, because they're parasites. What we have in Bitcoin is the need to gain energy first before you talk, and you prove that the free energy was converted into heat. And by free energy, I don't mean that you didn't pay for. That's a term in physics. It means that the energy can be used to do work. So the free energy of the work that you can theoretically do, some of it is done simply to create your messages. So what we have here is a manipulator with tiny antlers who's saying, don't trust that guy, the guy with really big antlers. But the doe isn't fooled. She's pretty impressed with the other guy anyway. So that's what we need for the world. We need people to look for big antlers and start paying attention to those people, because those are real friends on average, not necessarily 100% of the time, but this is how we find good people to listen to instead of manipulators. So right now, I think most of the people in the world are a lot dumber than this doe in the drawing. So what else have I got? Well, let's talk about that one a little later. This one is kind of about looking into the small world network. And there's a shared consciousness. With the hub and spokes, there's a separate consciousness that is your adversary, that is attempting to conceal itself. With the small world network, there is a shared consciousness that you are a part of. And so what we see here is many reflections that are all being combined into many averages. So there's like one one kind of overall picture, but many smaller, slightly different ones. And this is like, well, if you've ever read Leibniz, the monadology, this is like a monad that we're looking into. This is what it's like being in the small world network. So anyway, that's how Bitcoin works.
It's a lot to take in. That is a lot of information. And I think it especially pertains to, like you said, everything going on in the world right now. But whew, I'm kind of reeling from it. It's a lot of information to take in all at once. But I guess we'll move away from that for a second, and we'll come back to it in a minute. I wanted to touch on, so recently we saw an attempted reorg attack on BSV, and the blocks, and malicious users tried to double spend the BSV coins. Do you think you could explain in simple terms what a reorg or 51% attack is, what it does specifically, and then explain why people would attempt such a costly attack in the first place?
Sure. Well, so a key to the security of Bitcoin is that average users can rely on the on SPV mode, which means simplified payment verification. And what that means is that they download the block headers, which do not take up very much information, and they follow the chain with the most proof of work. And in general, they are able to assume that the chain with the highest proof of work is also the valid chain, because the use of proof of work, it forces the service providers to be honest. They are they're required to be people who collect energy before they're allowed to talk. So manipulation doesn't work very well, because manipulators need to talk first in order to gain energy. So, what we have now is a problem that has resulted from the huge degree of deception that has occurred in Bitcoin. So what we have is an invalid chain, BTC, that, where many people have been have believed that this chain is the one that will survive in the future, or will be the most valuable in the future, when really it's just like what we were talking about earlier. BTC is kind of like a barren island of pirates that they try to trick more people into joining the island and into becoming pirates with it, instead of like farming the island, growing food for each other.
They wait for somebody to get off the boat, they shank them, they steal their money, and then they get in their boat and row away.
Well, they do, but then and then the people remaining on the beach, they have to become pirates. So, and they believe that it's a good idea. So after they get shanked, they don't even realize that that's what happened. They're like, they think that if they become pirates too, then they're going to be super rich. And so the BTC coins have been valued at a very high price, and consequently a lot of hash power has been deployed to collect these BTC coins. And the miners who have been involved in this are not required to think about the long-term security of the network. In fact, really they can't, because the central developer nodes have prevented them from being involved in long-term security, because they want everybody, the developers want them to have all the power, and they want the miners to have none of the power. And so there is a cartel that involves the crypto exchanges and the developer groups. And this cartel makes money off of investors who don't understand anything, investors who can be tricked into being pirates and thinking they're going to get rich doing that, right? That's the basis for most of the crypto industry. And they don't want anyone to be genuinely successful, because then that kind of eliminates everything they're doing. So one of the ways that people have misunderstood Bitcoin is the idea that the highest proof of work chain is the valid chain. In other words, it's acquiring proof of work that makes the chain valid, as opposed to as opposed to providing a digital cash service, right? So what they say is that a chain that has a minority of hash power is vulnerable to attacks, whereby miners with lots of hash power can control what happens with the chain, because they can, like, if you have more hash power than the whole rest of the network, you can orphan everybody else's block. So in other words, you don't build on other people's blocks, and then they have no say about what happens in the network. But there is a difference between a valid chain and an invalid chain, regardless of how much hash power there is. So if a chain was used to double spend, then that is an invalid chain. In other words, if a transaction existed, was observed by the miners, and was then later replaced by a different transaction when this new chain came out with more hash power, then that is a double spend, because once a transaction is accepted by the miners, then they're supposed to process it, or else that's a double spend. The problem excuse me, the problem is that ordinary users of Bitcoin cannot identify this double spend on their own, because they don't have all of the blocks. Only the service providers, the miners, know that there was a double spend necessarily. And it's their job to prevent this and to provide a good service for the ordinary users. So what happened recently in BSV is just like what I was talking about. So someone with more hash power than the whole BSV network tried to create a double spend by making a lot of secret blocks, making a longer chain and then releasing it all at once. And this chain had a different transaction in it. And so what that means is that there is a valid chain that is in conflict with an invalid chain. But the miners have seen what happened. So they are witnesses to the double spend. And that means they can go after the producer of the invalid chain legally, because a double spend is illegal. And so what we have now, well, I mean, I don't think that this I don't think that there are two. I don't think this is going on right at this moment. But if it was, what we would have is one miner who is continuously spending energy to maintain a crime that, you know, he ultimately will not get away with, and we have other miners who don't have the same amount of hash power who are building on a chain that, you know, if ultimately will make them a lot more money, and which will not result in, you know, their operation being eliminated. And so we have one person with a lot of hash power who is causing some short-term problems for people, but who will eventually be stopped and who won't be able to do it anymore. And then we have other people who are honest, who will maintain the integrity of the network, and eventually everything will be fine again. And so what would have been better is if people had understood how this would all work beforehand and not tried to do the 51% attack, but instead people they're just going to have to learn that that sort of thing won't work long term, and people who attempt it they won't be able to do it anymore after a while. So eventually these attacks will stop, and they.
Oops, hold up. I think I lost you. Oh, there you are.
Did you lose me for a second?
Yep, it's the internet was unstable there for a second, but I see you now.
How long was I
for a second or so.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
that doesn't matter.
But yeah, I mean, I think that was eloquently put. You know, there are malicious users, and you know, it's like a child. Sometimes you have to actually do the action to find out what the consequences are in order to not do them again.
Yeah.
So you know, people are just going to have to learn. And the BSV community as a whole doesn't seem to be affected by it. They're like, we'll get through it. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Just ignore it.
Yeah.
But you know, in some good news on BSV, we saw recently an average block size of 100 megabytes, And then we saw a record block of 500 megabytes. And then now I think it's even up to a gig. So there's a lot of interesting and cool stuff coming out, especially when I think it was Vitalik, the creator of Ethereum. He came out and said something a while ago. I mean, there's a couple of years saying, oh, well, BSV can't, scale and blah, blah, blah. Well, here we are. But do you think you could explain the difficulty adjustment algorithm, and why BSV hasn't reverted back to the original DAA? Why was the DAA created so that BSV couldn't fall far behind, BTC? Why do people sit there and say, oh, it's the DAA is a double-edged sword? And when do you think it might eventually revert back to the original DAA?
We're going back to the original difficulty adjustment algorithm. I'm not sure when that will happen. But yeah, the difficulty adjustment algorithm, well, that was changed by Amaury when we had the Bitcoin Cash split, and excuse me, and well, I think the most important difference for our purposes is that it has different limits for how much the difficulty can adjust. And well, I'm not, I mean, I just don't know enough about it to say how it works and how it causes the effects that we've seen with it, because I'm kind of just looking forward to going back to the original one. But it causes these oscillations in hash power between BTC and BSV and BCH. Well, I'm not sure why it does that, but it does. And when we get rid of that, then we'll stop having that problem.
Right. Well, I mean, BTC has been wrought with congestion issues and, its inability to scale at large. So what do you think are some scenarios where BTC could suffer a chain death? And if it were to, I think it's been estimated that something like 50% of all institutional investors in America are already invested into BTC. What do you think that could mean from an economic standpoint? And how do you think it'll impact BSV specifically?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good question. The thing is that there are many reasons that BTC doesn't work, and it's not really obvious to me which reason is going to lead to the death of BTC. So fundamentally, there's this problem with restricting bandwidth, which is that you can't have a growing economy. And the Lightning Network does not really fix this problem at all, because it doesn't genuinely let you just pay anybody for things. So you just look at Twitch, for example. You would not be able to do Twitch on the transactions on Twitch. When you like and branch and comment and do different things, each of these actions in the network creates payments not just to some merchant with whom you've already established a connection, but to just any random other people who are involved in the conversation. So that's what you can do with the blockchain, and not what you can do with the Lightning Network. So we have an economy that cannot grow in BTC. So, I mean, eventually people will realize that they need stuff, they need food, and they need shelter, and they need things to keep themselves alive, and things to make life worth living. And BTC isn't going to give them that. They're going to have to divert some of their resources. Well, right now the economy is really being destroyed a lot, so it's going to be more difficult to get some of these things in the future. People are going to have to start actually putting resources, start thinking about how their resources are getting them the things that they really need. And that means that they're going to be taking those resources out of BTC. And they won't be able to afford to, to say like, BTC is going to make me rich in the future. Because they're going to have to be saying, I need to spend money now to get stuff that I need now. So that's one thing that will eliminate BTC. And of course, people who have invested in BTC, they're people who don't understand how to think about the future very well, because they're people who get on a barren island to become pirates, instead of people who would want to get on a lush green island where they can farm or something. See, so their BTC investors are going to get hurt earlier than BSV investors, and they're not going to be able to think about the future as much. So that will be something that can kill BTC. So there's also this problem with congestion. So if the price of BTC crashes, then these 1 megabyte blocks start coming out a lot less frequently. And so at some congestion problem, we can have this this positive feedback where congestion crashes the price, and then that makes congestion even worse. And that's of course what was in that chain death video that you were discussing. But another thing about BTC is that it has legal problems. So we could see the entire network being taken down because it's doing these anonymous transactions. Or we could also see the maintainers of the network being forced to change the rules by court order. So maybe BTC won't be eliminated because it's illegal. Maybe it will be forced to change its own rules. So I don't know which of those scenarios will be the one that that plays out. But the people in BTC are on an unsustainable path. So they're like lemmings who have jumped off a cliff, and they're saying, well, everything is going okay so far.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's not just that. There's a lot of different things going on in this space. There's been kind of a shift from proof of work to proof of stake with some of these other projects and just general things going on. And I'm curious as to what your thoughts on the future of mining will be, especially with video card sales continuing to rise.
Well, let's go back to this this picture that I showed you earlier. So here we go. Here's the manipulator, and he's saying, don't trust the buck with big antlers. That's proof of stake. So proof of stake is a way of creating the hub and spokes network. It makes it easy for manipulators behind the scenes to gain control over the network. Well, I mean, I would say that we've been using a proof of stake system for our governments essentially for a while, and that's kind of what enabled them to get taken over. If you have to gain energy before you can talk, you need to ensure that you're saying something good to people, because you won't survive by scamming them that way. When we have a proof of work based network, then we have the small world, and we have honest information about the global state, and the most prominent people will be the ones who want to do the most benefit to others. And when we have a proof of stake system, we'll have lots of people talking about how great everything is and how they're promoting freedom or whatever. And it will all be talk. It will all be deception to lure people in,
Right.
and to make it easy for people who think they know everything and who deserve to control everything to have that power over everyone.
Right. So does this kind of go into the game theory about Bitcoin, and sort of into the conversations, I guess, that you've talked about in the past involving the peacock's tail? Um, could you
Yes,
elaborate a
so
little
the
more?
antlers, the antlers are a costly signal, and the peacock's tail is a costly signal. It's just that the meaning of a message is a little bit different.
Hmm.
So when we see these costly signals on males, if they look like if they look beautiful, then that usually means that it's about impressing females. And if they're more like weapons, then it's about males assessing other males. So in this picture, it's maybe not quite biologically accurate, because I've had the female looking at the difference between the two males, when really they should be fighting it out themselves, and she just goes along with whoever wins. But
Right.
whatever, it's the same thing. It doesn't the I'm really talking about people, and I'm really talking about I'm talking about society, and
Right.
um and so let me show you this last picture here now. So this one has a buck, and he says, look, I'm losing energy with his antlers. He's pointing to his antlers. And then there's a wolf who has a gun and who's dressed like like he's in the army. And he says, I surrender. I'll do anything you say. And the reason, the meaning of this picture is that it is better to we can have non-lethal conflicts using honest signals of fitness that prevent war, because they allow people to observe who is stronger and who would win in a war without actually having the war. So what we have with bucks who fight is we have a way of fighting that prevents it enables the loser to get away to fight another day. The antlers interlock, and the bucks can assess each other's strengths accurately. So instead of, like, if you didn't have an honest signal of fitness, then really the only way that you would know that someone was really stronger than you was if he killed you. Because if he was just saying, you'd better go away because I'm stronger, well, everybody's going to say that, because they want to avoid fighting and they want to win without fighting, right? So everybody will say that. But when we have an honest signal of fitness, then we can know who is strong before we get killed. And people who understand this are going to be better at surviving in the future. And what I hope to see in the future is nations in conflict over the strength of their economies rather than over the strength of their militaries. Because you could say, my economy is bigger, therefore I could build a bigger army if I wanted. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's what we will have when we go to a Bitcoin-based system. And we will have nations that say, for national security, we need to maximize our national hash power. And they're going to do that instead of building the biggest army.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and we can, it stinks because there's so many things going on in the space, especially when it pertains to the US government and, and cryptocurrencies. Recently, I think it was the SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, came out and was talking about how the US Supreme Court is interested in going after cryptocurrencies that they view as securities. And I think we saw this recently in the lawsuit with Ripple's XRP. And so with all of these lawsuits and regulation, it's just hampering growth in the space. So what do you think the implications of these new regulations and things could mean for projects like Ethereum?
Yeah, well, I mean, there have been ideas in law that are much older than Bitcoin, which say who the government is going to try to regulate. And so an important idea is the Howey test. And well, I don't quite remember everything in it, but the Howey test has to do with the idea that there is a promise or expectation that if you invest in something that other people are going to do work to make it valuable. So like if I had a company and I wanted to do an IPO and say, look, this company is really good, maybe you want to buy into it, right? That that would be a security that would need to be registered with the SEC, because the idea is that I would be the one who's building up the company, and then if you buy the stock, you're funding me. So Bitcoin is a security, but it is not one where anybody is promising to make it more valuable. If you buy in, basically you need to make Bitcoin more valuable if you want to ensure that it happens, right? If you want Bitcoin to be successful with the highest probability that you can know, you have to do it yourself. And and many of these other coins are not like Bitcoin, because there is this idea that you are investing in the open source developers and that they are going to be the ones who will make the coin valuable.
Right.
So, I hope that what I would want is that whatever, I don't think that we need new laws to handle the cryptos, and the old ones were good enough anyway. And hopefully any new legislation will be in accordance with what I already said.
Right. Well, I mean, talking about, programmers and everything else, from the perspective of a software dev yourself, what is the best programming language to use? How does code actually make it on the blockchain? What differentiates a good coder from a bad coder, a slow coder from a fast coder? And what are some skills or prerequisites that you think are just generally good to have if you're planning on coding?
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. Well, programming is communication. It's not just between you and the machine, it's between you and other people.
Okay.
So the important, you're not just telling the computer what to do, you are also explaining to other people what you have told it to do. And that's what makes for programming that can grow into something big and successful, because other people can easily join in on it. So my favorite programming language is C++, and that one is, well, it has some big detractors, but I think that if you get good at programming, then C++ has what you want. And other programming languages feel quite limited in a way. And C++ is sometimes maligned as a low-level language, but this isn't really true. It has many levels of abstraction, and it allows you to, if you understand how to use it, it allows you to program from a much higher level standpoint than you can with many other languages. There's also some practicality to C++, since lots of other people also use it. So, I mean, there are other languages that are very good, that are not as popular. So they it's not as easy to get things done with them. Like Haskell is an example of that. That's been a very influential programming language, although it has never had a huge number of users. I mean, I would like it if we all could sort of just do Haskell, but programming languages that already have a big base have a lot of advantages just because there's a lot of prior work, and that's necessary. So right now in BSV, I think people are mainly using JavaScript. That's kind of out of necessity since that's the language that the web uses. But I think that if we want to make really robust systems that are efficient, we need to not rely on JavaScript so much. JavaScript is kind of a big mess that causes a lot of problems. But right now it's kind of like anything goes. We just need to get things that'll work,
Right. No, definitely. I mean, that sounds good. Going back to kind of everything that you were talking about before, like when we were talking about value and price and what is value. And you got onto the subject of, well, eventually people are going to need to sell things for tangible items. They're not going to be able to invest and wait for BTC to go up in price, up in value. And we've seen so many changes with the government. It's all very similar to what you were talking about before with like the hub and the spokes and everything. And I would say, yeah, the government is exactly like that, in a way. And with all the changes that we've been seeing so far in wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been so many opposing viewpoints of just how vaccines are distributed, and the economies, the world economies, the social state of the world in general. It's all over the place. And especially, I think the things that concern me particularly are that, here in America, we're continuously printing money. And to me, there's a lot of signs that say, hey, we're headed to another potential collapse similar to that of the 2008 financial crisis. So I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on the social and economic state. Do you think we're headed for a crash? And if we do, where do you think how do you think cryptocurrencies are going to fare in wake of all of that?
Okay, well, yes, we've got some significant challenges. Well, we've got some big problems to overcome right now. So well, the value of money is about the other people. And so what I would like to see is for Bitcoiners to think about each other as if their lives depended on the other Bitcoiners' lives, because they really do. And the way we make Bitcoin succeed is by protecting each other. So Bitcoin is the Bitcoin network is the foundation of a secure system, a system that's more secure than anything that has been previously created by people. But we need to make it into that secure system. And we need to do this by identifying threats to other people and mitigating them. And it shouldn't just be about business. It should be about other people's lives. That's what it's about in the world now. People need to we have attacks that are attempts to commit mass murder, and we need to prevent these. So the COVID-19 pandemic is designed to distract people while society is being transformed into a totalitarian system. So this shadow government that I was talking about, that was operating in secret before, is coming out, and people involved in it want to operate openly. And their system is one that that's like a global human farm, where most of the people are the farm animals. And this system is unsustainable because people are not really useful without the ability to act independently. So this system will fail, but what I would hope is that it doesn't fail with it fails without bringing down more people with it than it already has. Because if people are controlled and can't escape, a lot of them can die before freedom can be reasserted. So COVID-19 is a genetically engineered organism, and it was designed to infect humans. So they took a germ that was for bats, and they changed it so that it works on humans. And they designed a spike protein that can bind to different types of cells. So they took a respiratory virus in bats, and they made it into a respiratory virus in humans that can also infect other cells. This so then people were scammed with this PCR test that is being used to greatly increase the apparent destruction of this virus, which is actually not all that dangerous in proportion to the response that has been rolled out. So the PCR test is used to to say that there are many cases of COVID-19 when really there probably are not so many. A PCR test is supposed to be used as a component in a diagnosis. So it is one observation out of many that can be made on a patient, and that is how it is supposed to be used. But instead, we are giving people the PCR test, and if it comes out positive, then we say that they have COVID-19. But really, it could be that they have, one dead virus up their nose, because dead viruses are everywhere. You have a little bit of everything in your body. So just because it's found on a PCR test doesn't mean that you are sick. And they are also using many more cycles. The PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. So how many times do they run this chain reaction? They're using far more cycles than is needed to detect a genuine infection. And so people can have very tiny amounts of this virus and it will still come out positive. The test is far too sensitive. And then other things were done to ensure that the number of deaths from COVID-19 was maximized. So people who got it or who were diagnosed with it were told to stay home until it got so bad that they needed to be on a ventilator, even though there are quite a few early treatment protocols which are now known to prevent people from getting that bad. And there was also the use of now I forget the name, but there was a drug that was used on many patients in the United States that's actually toxic and promoted death. Do you remember?
Was that the hydroxychloroquine?
No, that's a good drug that helps prevent death. But the one that was actually used on people was, I just don't remember what it was called. So let's see. And people were told to social distance and stay away from each other. So that's an attempt to create the hub and spokes network. It's an attempt to prevent interpersonal connection and create dependency on the central node. And it does not help prevent the spread of disease. Mostly COVID-19 gets spread in hospitals. And there was a recent study that compares North and South Carolina, which had different policies as to lockdowns and social distancing, and there was not a difference in the spread of infection in these states. So the point of social distancing and lockdowns is to keep people away from each other and to prevent them from spreading real information. They need to be dependent on the central node for their knowledge of the global state. And of course, at the same time, we have seen lots of information control and lots of attempts to make people believe that that the pandemic is very serious and the early treatment protocols have not got attention, have not been talked about in the mainstream media, in the the official information sources. Things that could have saved people's lives are being kept from them. I mean, information, and it's an attempt to prevent people from talking about their view of reality, or their view of the global state.
Right.
And that everything has to go through these information bottlenecks that allow people to select what everyone else will see. And so then these vaccines, well, these fake vaccines were rolled out. And well, normally, how long does it take to make a vaccine? It takes like 10 years. And most of them don't end up being put into production. What we have with these COVID shots is a totally new technology that has never been used on humans before, which is called a vaccine, but which would not be considered a vaccine based on the way vaccines were defined until recently. So I think this was in 2013, they changed the definition of a vaccine so that they could include more stuff in it. So previously, a vaccine was supposed to be a dead germ that's supposed to train your body to have an immune response.
Right.
So now they say, well, it's anything that's supposed to create an immune response, basically. So we have this mRNA and DNA technology, and it's being called a vaccine because if you call it a vaccine, then you don't have liability, and you can't get sued if it doesn't work correctly. And they develop these things in less than a year, and somehow they know that they're safe and effective when really
normally it takes much longer to develop a vaccine.
Really, there's no way that you could know that it was safe and effective. And well, I mean, these shots contain genetic material in them that replicates in your body when you get injected with them.
Okay.
So that shouldn't be any different from how people think about sex. It's not like a baby develops in the uterus if you get the shot, but if something is replicating in your body, you can have very big problems because of that.
Right.
That's on a similar scale to what can happen if you have a baby when you don't want to, or with somebody who you don't want to. And the drug companies are acting like people who want to pressure you into sex, because they say if you don't get the shot, you're a bad person, right? So they're not like peacocks who have a beautiful tail, which proves that they're a good male. They're like they're like
the little deer with the small antlers.
Right. Yeah, they're like that. They're like people who wouldn't be able to have sex with women if they let the women see who they really were.
Right.
So, um, so, well,
So we need to, it sounds like what you're saying is we need to protect each other from this, because it's the misinformation that's being spread, the fear that's being spread by the deer with the little antlers. And if we're not careful, then the hub, which we could assume in this scenario would be something like the government or the vaccine producers, the people behind the curtain, which you were talking about earlier, trying to spread that information so that we do end up trying to attack each other over what we perceive to be correct information, even though it's ultimately false.
yeah, right. So, well, I mean, if we're both using the same money, that means that I want to give you what you need, and you want to give me what I need, because that's how we get more of the money.
Right.
And so if um if the Bitcoiners are tricked into killing themselves en masse, that's very bad for the value of Bitcoin. That
Right.
means that Bitcoin goes down. Okay.
Right.
So what we want is to keep each other alive so that we can keep giving each other what we need. And well, that's what's great about Bitcoin, is that it puts it aligns our interests. So, I mean, it shouldn't, we help ourselves by helping each other. And well, I mean, I think people need to get a lot better at it. I mean, I think from what I've seen that people in BSV, well, there's a lot who understand that these COVID shots are dangerous, and there's a lot of people who understand the problem. But I think we could take things a lot further. And I mean, I know that there's not very many Bitcoiners right now, but I mean, I think that what's really going to bring more people in is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Like outside of Bitcoin, we have this depopulation agenda. What we need in Bitcoin is to help each other maximize our inclusive fitness. So, in other words, that means we tell each other what will be effective in terms of having more viable offspring in the future. And we try to give each other real information about that. Not that there isn't still a sex contest, because everybody wants to be the most productive, right? But we benefit our own position by giving out good information. You have to select what you would want to give out and what you would want to keep for yourself. But what we have in Bitcoin is something where people want to help each other a lot more than outside of Bitcoin. And that's what will help keep people alive if people learn this. So what we've seen from the VAERS data is that the vaccines are very dangerous. and we've seen a massive increase in reports since the vaccines were rolled out in the United States. The 2021 reports, there's about 50 times more than there were in previous years. And we also know that there is underreporting with VAERS. So we don't really know how deadly these vaccines really are, but we can guess that they're doing a lot of damage. And now we are also seeing that they do not prevent people from being infected. And in fact, you're really worse off if you've had the shot. And we've seen this data from different countries that, well, the data from Europe is that the more vaccinated countries have worse outbreaks of COVID-19 now. And the CDC has admitted that that is also what is happening in the United States now. So, what we're seeing is an attack on people, and what the world needs is something that makes people want to protect each other. That makes people want to imagine attacks and prevent them before they happen. And right now, people are so brainwashed that they're going along with the attack. They are being tricked into killing themselves. What we have with Bitcoin is a short-term incentive to think long-term, and that is what gives us the ability to imagine attacks and prevent them before they happen. And the reason we have this is, if you're a miner and you can, or if you're a node and you can buy more hash power, you get a bigger fraction of the total network. So you increase your income. So what allows you to pay a little bit more for hash power is knowledge of your own sustainability. So if you can convince yourself that your node will be around a long time from now, then you can take on more risk today, which is what you do when you pay more for hash power. Then you get more of the network, so you can increase your income from that.
Right.
And that is not what we have outside of Bitcoin. Outside, we have such short-term thinking that we're, people are doing things that will destroy society if they're allowed to keep going. And the people involved in this are able to keep gaining money, so they can keep doing it.
Right. They keep getting a bigger portion of the hash power, and
if they had to do that, they wouldn't be able to destroy society anymore, because they would have to keep converting some of their energy into heat. And well,
right,
if they don't really understand reality, they don't really know what what they can risk from that.
Well, I think it was Craig Wright. He once said that Bitcoin with a stable protocol takes away power. If no one can change the protocol, not him, not God, then it really removes that power globally. With so many opposing viewpoints on the matter at large right now, that what we've been discussing and everything else, what do you think Craig meant when he made that statement, and how do you think it ties into the current world events?
Well, I mean, what we need is a world where people are equal before the law, and we need a world with capitalism where people can grow to be as big as they can get by benefiting other people. But that that money that they make can't be good for corrupting the legal system. And well, that's what we have with Bitcoin, because we have a form of money that leaves records that can be used against you if you try to scam people. And we have we can block addresses that represent or that received funds illegally. So like funds that could be bribes or something like that. We can halt those and make the money useless. So Craig says we turn gold into lead and lead back into gold again. So if you try to use your wealth to put yourself above the law, then your gold is turned into lead. And then once you have been once there has been restitution, then it gets turned back into gold again.
Definitely. It's well, I hope that there is a change in the way people are thinking and approaching, how they're viewing the world as a whole. I want to believe personally that people are going through a mass awakening right now, and people are kind of waking up to the fact that there are some things going on, regardless of how you view the situation. There are definitely things going on. But kind of with that, I just wanted to ask you, maybe was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or inform our viewers on? Anything you may want to hint at, or anything?
Well, I mean, I guess I would like to talk about what I've been working on.
Okay.
So yes, I mean, I think people are waking up, but it is happening slowly because of the problems that I have discussed already, because of the censorship,
right,
and the control of information, and because once you get dependent on the hub, then it's hard to escape and find good information. If you try to detach yourself, you're kind of lost in a sea of bad information, and you have to search before you can find good information again. But we can do a lot to solve these problems. And that's what I've been working on. So what I said is we need to use proof of work as an upvote system.
Mm-hmm.
So so Reddit is kind of like a democracy in a way, because everybody is allowed to upvote anything, and the upvotes are free, and they all have an equal value. And of course, behind the scenes, you would imagine that Reddit is altering these values. Not that I know for certain, but they have that power. You wouldn't know, because they're another hub. That's something that they can do. So what we should do instead is upvoting content needs to be a costly signal. So what I have designed is a protocol for buying proof of work from Bitcoin miners.
Interesting.
In a Bitcoin transaction, and it's called Boost Proof of Work. And you basically put Bitcoins in an output, and the way to redeem the output is to run proof of work that works just like how it works in Bitcoin. So you can use the same machinery to redeem these outputs as you use to mine Bitcoin blocks. And so you pay, instead of getting upvotes for free, you pay to upvote, and what you buy with the payment is a partially inverted hash that anyone can verify. And so what we have then is an upvote system where you do not have a guaranteed vote. You can have votes that are as big as you want, but you have to pay for it. And when we use something like this, then we have a system that cannot be censored easily, because it no longer requires some central hub to ensure that you only get a certain number of, one upvote per content, right? That's what Reddit does, is ensures that's what you get.
Right.
But instead we have, we don't need a hub anymore, and we can figure out what content has been upvoted by scanning the blockchain. So then we do not have the same level of information control, and we do not have someone behind the scenes who can change the vote numbers. And we have competition for attention instead of sources of information. So what happens now is people have sources of information. So they decide that some publisher or something is good, and then they get attached to that publisher and read their content every day or whatever. So they say, like, I read the New York Times or whatever. And this is what gets people caught in bubbles, because the sources of information can get taken over, and it's not obvious that this is happening while it's happening, and they gradually change into propaganda systems. But what we have with proof of work as an upvote system is all information is in competition regardless of the source. So we don't have to care, we don't have to be attached to sources of information anymore. There's just endless competition. And we don't have to search for new information if our sources of information get corrupted, or the searching is easy, I should say. We do search, but it's a matter of just reading down the list of upvoted content, whereas now searching for information is much more difficult because we're following edges on a mesh network, and we just have to keep we have to wade through lots of bad information before we find good information.
Right.
With the proof of work system, the good information will tend to be closer to the top. So if you look at previous videos that I've done with people where I've discussed this with them, it just is as if nobody I'm talking to understands why we need this or what it's good for. And they say, like, nobody will pay to upvote content. Well, yes, they will, because if we attach proof of work to these upvotes, what you get is attention from rational actors. And if that's what you want, you have to pay for it. And that's how this game works. So like a source of information, that's kind of like being married.
Okay.
Because it's like saying this this source is a good producer of information, so I'm just gonna stick with him, right? But it's not like a person, because if a person gets older, he still has the same DNA. But a source of information isn't like that, because it can change, in terms of who. Lemon, go away. It can change in terms of who is behind it, who's really producing this information. So you don't really want to be married to a source of information. And
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like being married. If your husband or your wife or your significant other is thinking one way, they're going to influence your thoughts, because that's what you're hearing, that's what you're around. But if you have multiple sources of information, you can actually go to different people and then kind of draw your own conclusions instead of just being fed one narrative, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. So if you're a producer of information, that's like being the male. And if you're a consumer of information, that's like being the female. And I think that all information is alive and wants to reproduce, just like DNA. It's just that the manner of reproduction is different. So somebody who's a producer of information wants to get that information into your brain, and that's where the reproduction happens. So that's why being a consumer of information is like being the female, because the brain is like the womb. That's where the new ideas come from.
Right.
And the content is like the semen. And so there are some animals where all of the males get in a big contest, and every breeding season, and the relatively few of them will will have the most sex. There'll be like a few winners that end up fathering most of the children of the next generation.
Right.
And it happens as a result of the contest. So they get finely separated out, even if there's very tiny differences between these males. The best ones end up getting filtered out, and the females figure out who they are, and those are the ones who get all of the sex.
Right.
So that's what we want with information. So we don't, and these, well, so I'm going to change something I said earlier, because now I'm saying that the information itself is like the male, not the source of information. Well, I mean, I guess my analogy still works, but we have an endless competition. That's what we need, where they have to produce a sexual display before they can have sex. So before the information gets into your brain at all, you should verify that free energy was converted into heat. And that's the peacock's tail. So yeah, I mean, if you look back at my other videos, when I talk about the peacock's tail, like a lot of people don't get what I'm saying. And they're like, well, what is the peacock's tail? Well, it's about sex. I mean, people, then people get annoyed when I make it. So I make the analogy so explicit, but that's what this is about. I mean, what we have now is a problem where bad ideas reproduce too easily, because we can use emotional manipulation and control to get people to accept things that they wouldn't if they were thinking more rationally. But if the idea has to come with a sexual display before you even know what it is, then that manipulation doesn't work anymore. Then good ideas win easily. And what we have is a problem of, so when we have these costly signals in males, the winners are all of the females and the top males, and the losers are the less fit males.
Right.
So what we have is a society where there are lots of less fit males, metaphorically speaking. They have tricked people into identifying with them and into identifying with their problems, when really that isn't going to make society any good. What that will lead to is lots of mutant children, right? So that's not what we want, and that's what we have now. And I'm still talking metaphorically. So mutant children, that's like communism. That's like bad ideas that hurt people, that we need to prevent.
It's like the opposite of what we want from Darwinism, essentially.
Right. Yeah. So, right. I mean, it is Darwinism. It's, and what, yeah, I mean, it's like, well, I mean, I've shown you the same picture over and over again. Let's just go back to it. Because this picture explains everything. But yeah, this is what our society is like right now, except that the females are stupid and they're listening to the less fit male.
Right.
And so so we need to get as smart as the doe in this picture is, and we can have a good society again. And ideas that are good and that are associated with the conversion of free energy into heat will transmit. And those are the ideas that people will all believe in. Those are things like capitalism. So, I mean, just think about if communists had to grow big antlers, right? So communists spend all day telling each other how to be incompetent. And then on top of that, they would also have to use their resources to appear strong in a way that they can't fake it. You see what I mean? Like,
Right.
That causes their society to fall apart more quickly. And then the people with capitalist ideas will be able to grow big antlers and not fall apart. So then what we need is a Cold War that's not about nuclear weapons anymore. It's just about hash power. That's also just like what I was telling you about earlier about how, in nature, there are sometimes bucks that are born without antlers, or they never end up growing antlers. And they're a lot more dangerous than the bucks with antlers because they rely on headbutting, and the antlers spread out a blow so that it's not all focused on one point. So they're not as bad, and they can also interlock for assessing strength. So if you're a buck without antlers, remember the only way to prove that you're stronger is to kill your opponent. So that's what they do with headbutting. And that's kind of what we have now in the world is everybody is like a buck without antlers, where the proof of strength is based on who you can kill. And we can move away from that, and then we will have a system where people know about each other's strengths, and then it will be more like it'll be a peaceful game, even though the possibility of violence is always there. There's sort of a lot more that is going to prevent it before it happens.
Oh, definitely. That's a lot to take in. I think it's a great idea. I would like to see something like that be implemented personally, just for there to be a better way to look through and receive information. Because I think you're right. I think the biggest problem that we're facing right now as a society is the distribution of information. And then you've got the little bucks going around saying, hey, don't trust that guy that is or woman that's speaking true information. Essentially, it's a large dumbing down of society, and I think it's being done purposefully so that people can be manipulated easier into doing what the guy holding the shadow puppets wants them to do, and something like what you're talking about, a project like that would help out significantly, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll get it working eventually, but I've had a lot of trouble finding people to work with me on it because I've been having so much trouble, finding people who agree with me on the importance of the idea. People I've tried to work with have sort of, just not really, in my mind, they have not grasped the magnitude of the problem or the degree of the need for what I've been talking about. But I did have found a partner recently who seems very good so far. So hopefully we'll make a lot of progress, and then we'll have a proof of work upvote system that will let you share whatever information you want, pretty much. And so, so anyway, well, thanks for inviting me on your show and giving me so much opportunity to talk about everything and go on and on so much, because you really let me explain these ideas.
They're great ideas. They really are. You have a wealth of knowledge. You opened my mind on a lot of different concepts. It's I think everybody who's watching is going to find a lot of value out of the content that you helped produce today. And I too am very grateful for you to share your time and your wisdom with all of us. For sure. For sure.
All right. Well, thanks very much. And well, yeah, for the future audience, hope you enjoyed watching.
Definitely. Let us know down below if there are any questions that you guys would like answered in the future. Anybody you'd like to see me interview next. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And with that being said, you guys, we'll see you next time. Thank you, Daniel. You have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Lightning Network, because when you make